today we have we pulled out the big guns, and the big guns being WBCSD and the Capitals Coalition in the form of George and Gracie, Mark Gough and Diane Holdorf. First question, the standard question, which is this your first COP? And it's a loaded question, deliberately. So, Mark.
No.
Okay. Is this your first biodiversity COP?
No.
Okay. How many COPs have you been to?
I can't remember.
Oh, see, I'm talking to my crowd, because when you get to, I think it's more than 10, but I can't remember. Okay. So, all right, Diane, first biodiversity COP?
First biodiversity COP, yes.
Snap. Been time, Nancy. Thank
Yes.
you. But certainly not first COP.
Certainly not.
So why are you both here on behalf of your constituencies, being Capitals Coalition, WBCSD? Diane, why don't you go first?
Okay. Well, we've been working together actually super closely with the Capitals Coalition, WWF, Nature Conservancy, Conservation International, all these leading organizations to create this campaign around nature positive.
Yeah.
To really create an accelerator, an understandable accelerator mechanism. We have found that really resonates for our members. So for us to be able to be here to accelerate that business is ambitious, they're ready, we've got guidance that people are following. We're gearing businesses into readiness for the science-based targets.
Yep.
We're gearing them into how to report on the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosure,
yep.
TNFD. They've all been on this climate journey. They're understanding how to follow that same accountability framework to be able to do their materiality assessments and their setting of reports. So the readiness is there, the understanding is building. We're here to support that and help that all go faster. And by having them all come, we think it's actually having a meaningful impact to ratchet ambition in the negotiations.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Mixed right now, but we are hearing that there's quite some surprise, the level of interest and participation.
A lot of the negotiators, and this has been my most active COP, I've done quite a few, but I spent an awful lot more time with the negotiators than I normally do. Normally we have this sort of circus that goes around the outside, but we do these nice events and talk about the things that are important. But I've actually been in lots of really difficult conversations about whether the bracket should be removed, what text should be there. And we've got to be clear on this, because Friends of the Earth and others have said, well, business is having undue influence on this.
Yes.
So that's difficult one, because actually it's a whole world thing. Everyone's got to be involved in the solution here.
Yeah.
And the good thing about businesses is business is very good at negotiating, at doing deals and working out what's going on. And sometimes maybe the governments find that a little bit more challenging, I think. So I think that some of the efficiencies and some of the ways that we work as businesses have been helpful to come into the conversations. But we have been influencing text in a positive way, because, sorry, this is the key thing here. The businesses we're bringing with us are actually calling for mandatory assessment and disclosure.
Yes.
So Target 15 for us, that is basically the work that we've been doing for the last 10 years on how do you assess and disclose impacts and dependencies.
I was about to say.
That's what we've been doing. Now
it's a very rightful concern.
Yeah.
Because there was quite a lot of lobbying by business before this COP, leading into it, to try to shut that down. But the companies that are here are the ones who want higher ambition. And I think that's the piece where, the readiness comes into play. They want to be able to make commitments and take actions and support governments in doing that. And they're actually here to ask for that governance.
There's also something I realized from just coming from climate COP. When you go there, you've either got some senior people or you've got the lobbyists. And you do have the lobbyists in the climate negotiations lobbying for their sector and things like that.
Yep.
I don't know any of the people here are lobbyists. There aren't any lobbyists here. The people that are here are the experts on biodiversity, the experts on nature, they're the people that have come.
And experts from within business.
That's what I mean.
That's been the real shocker, I think, for me. In a positive sense, that you've got business actually not just interested and engaged and wanting to lead on issues like mandatory reporting and the elimination of subsidies, but having their experts here to talk to the other experts from the researchers, from government, from even the NGO community and others. And it's a very different element to this COP compared to certainly 3-4 weeks ago in Sharm el Sheikh, which was very much around an almost business and trade fair versus that other thing that was happening in another space that we think there was negotiations going on, but we didn't know until we saw the white smoke. Yeah,
Completely.
it was really interesting. So let's go back to Capitals Coalition, because absolutely, I was going to make a point. It's 10 years almost to the day, not quite 8, since you and I met in a conversation about how we could take the NCP and bring it to Australia based on the work that had been done by the WBCSD, which we'd only just joined. And it's been an interesting road. I wouldn't say there's no struggle, but such appetite in government to understanding what natural capital is. And we know that there's been an announcement by the Australian government with the United States government. We're still waiting for the detail. But at its core is natural capital accounting.
Yeah.
Who knew?
So we're at the point now. So there's 2 targets. Target 14 is asking for governments to do natural capital accounting. Target 15 is asking for businesses
To report.
to basically and assess and report. We've got to make sure it's that about as well. So that's basically the natural capital accounting, which we're now feeding through TNFD and science-based targets. All of those bits are coming into target 50. But target 14, we're now at over 80 countries that have committed to doing natural capital accounting. Australia's been doing it for a while now, as we know. But then the interesting bit with that is if that becomes brought into the GBF, the Global Biodiversity Framework here, we'll have all countries doing that. What we were talking about with the ministers and others today is that what we need to do is we need to make sure there's an interplay, public-private with that. There's no point the governments doing all these lovely statistics in their nice books and keeping them there, and then businesses somewhere else. So we've got to get the flow of information between those, between governments and business. That's going to be one of the next exciting bits with that. But all the governments now are looking to do it. In the US, we went to the US with some colleagues from WBCSD and others 7 years ago. We went to the White House and we said, we want you to do this. And they invited us in. We started setting up the plans. Then there was a hiatus for 5 years.
Can't think what
happened.
Shocking.
No, but then Biden comes in and now there is the executive order from them.
And our government's announced that the work of natural capital accounting will wind its way into our national budgetary processes. I wouldn't have thought that would occur in my lifetime. I was hoping it would, but it now seems to have occurred. So from that becomes there's a whole suite of work that has to come out of this for business, irrespective of a good cop or a bad cop, as the WBCSD so eloquently puts it. What's your take? And I'd be very interested to hear from you as to the notion that if this doesn't succeed, does that really matter for business?
Well,
Discuss
that first, Mark, and then I'll come in.
Does it not matter? It's really hard to say that it doesn't matter when I'm sitting here not sleeping, trying to get things through. But I think the key thing is it is really important to have something to aim, a North Star, a Southern Cross, which is to this language. We need it to be ambitious, because that's going to make sure that we actually bring the system together. It's going to make things go faster. We know we don't have time to muck about and spend another 2 years, because these COPs as well only happen every 2 years. The climate COPs happen every year. So if we don't do something now, we come back and start discussing it again 2 years' time. We've already lost 2 years because of COVID. I mean, we just don't have time for this. So we need to have a framework to work in. But your question, if I'm reading it rightly, is our businesses going to still continue to do things? The momentum here, as we've seen by how many turned up, as we've seen by all of the interest we're getting on all of this work, is momentous. So that's going to continue anyway. If the framework's there, it will be a lot easier. If it isn't there, well, business is doing it because it's good for business. It's good for them.
And there will be a framework.
There will be something.
You know, and
the problem is, though, the problem is if they get a bad framework.
that's the problem.
And that would be worse than, I mean, it'd be better to have no framework than a bad one.
Yeah. So the answer is, of course it matters.
Right.
However, we're all here, you know, to make sure it's as ambitious as it can be. For all the reasons, Mark, you just said. I think what really gives me a lot of hope is that if that system somehow isn't landing what we all hope it will deliver, the momentum is not going to stop. And what the private sector is going to continue to do. Why is that? The reason is we are already going to have these accountability frameworks put into action. So once you get something like TNFD, the Nature related financial disclosures in place, companies are going to be reporting against this. This is actually one of the discussion points we've been able to use with the negotiators who were concerned about Article 15 and having assess and disclose mandatory language in there. It will already be required to penalize the companies that are in your country. Who will have to be, or striving to be reporting in this for positive capital reinforcement, capital market reinforcement. So these types of things will definitely move the system forward. And we're going to see that, I think, clearly into the climate COP next year, which is, of course, the big global stock take. This will be a theme that will carry through.
Okay, let's go a little bit lighter. A question around what surprised and delighted you about this COP thus far? Yeah.
Well, I have to say the amount, I'll go. This has not been a COP. Well, one of the things that I've really been enjoying is that it's not a COP full of commitments and announcements. And that might sound counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But when you have the big sort of unveil, look what we're doing, flash stuff. It doesn't necessarily have the substance behind it. And that, of course, is a bit of a blowback when we have to really be striving for accountability and deliverables, right? What I'm really encouraged by here is that there is action and it is being shared as progress, not just here's what we promised to do. I think we'll get there. We need to get to the types of commitments, but it's going to be more on the science-based targets when they're ready, which should help us blow past or at least catch up to where we've now gotten to on the climate side.
I completely agree with all of that. For me, I shouldn't be surprised by this, but actually the collaboration, so we had the global goal meeting just a minute ago, we were all huddled in a small room. The collaboration and the way that we're working together is there's actually a lot of trust in this. Because it's really difficult when you're at these sort of things, you're going from meeting to meeting and all of that, to still have some core. But the core here of what we're saying, we all agree actually on what needs to be done. So that is really important. And bringing in these businesses and others and saying, so you mentioned science-based targets. So the work that we started this year and is really coming to fruition here. Tony from TNFD, Erin, Billman, myself, we're talking almost every day about how can we build, in fact, our technical teams are meeting now, I think, to talk about actually making there's more connections between all of our work.
Well, in fact, Tony was due to come, but he's too busy, so he's coming tomorrow.
He's actually meeting the US delegation that
right as we speak.
We want to encourage.
So that's but he came to me and he was saying, you just met with them, let's make sure we're consistent. So all of that, what collaboration that we've got here, that's really, I'm not surprised, but actually it's really pleasing to see.
Okay, so you're long-time COP attendees, and
that just means we're old, is what you're saying.
No, we're seasoned performers.
Okay, thank you, that's better.
That's much better. Gosh, don't do that to us. Oh my goodness. And let's look at the opposite of that ledger, which is what's not here. And let me give you an example. The question of the role of Indigenous people is one that's been brought up in our own delegation, that of the Australian government itself, is concerned that voice isn't perhaps as front and centre as it might be, largely because there hasn't been enough groundwork done prior to this. And we're not talking about a business focus here, we're talking about a particular constituency out of our country that probably could have done more. And that's because, in stark contrast at Sharm el-Sheikh, COP27, there was an enormous focus about involving not just the stories of Indigenous people, but how they were going to build knowledge and sharing of their knowledge into ongoing projects and initiatives, and ultimately into the accountability, ambition, and action program. So are you seeing any gaps thus far in the program, or are you seeing areas where we've got to do better after this because it's not here as it could be?
So there's two sides.
And I can think of one because we talked about it the other day at lunch. The food system discussion.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm interrupting.
That's okay. That isn't where I was going to take
it. Okay,
but we'll come back to that.
Well, put a pin in that one and we'll come back to it.
I think one of the things that has been important in this COP is that there has been a very high level of recognition that the place in which we're holding this event is on the unceded territories of the indigenous Mohawk tribes. And so there's a lot of opening recognition to that. What then has not, and just to add to that, this actual location, because their territory is very large, this specific location is where nations have been meeting for generations to come to agreements. So the fact that we're on that kind of incredibly valuable land.
So the Congress itself is on
sits
land that is a meeting place of
Some
the-
tribes,
tribal nations.
Exactly.
and still is actually as well.
And still is,
Yeah.
exactly. And so there's some real sort of beautiful harmony to that.
Yeah, very much so.
Second, the indigenous communities are the natural keepers of the lands that most need to be protected, conserved, and restored.
Yeah.
And there is that discussion as well. However, it's not as front and center, as you said, engaged in the discussions as it was in Charm. And that is definitely bridges that need to be built.
But I mean, one of the things with COPs that you find is that the reason why agriculture ended up in the climate change COP and the nature-based solutions and all of that was because the year before in Glasgow, that's what we were talking about in the corridors. And we got it in the next year in the text.
Yeah.
There's something about this rolling pattern that you get. I think because we've been in Canada, because there has been this talk about Indigenous peoples, when we've just set up the Value Commission, we've got 2 or 3 people from there representing Indigenous views, because that is really key now to it.
Yeah.
And that may be, I'm being completely honest, was something we weren't doing enough of in the past. We are doing more about it now. I think that actually what we've seen here, we will see playing through hopefully next time in the next COP. I don't think it's been as prominent as it should have been, but I think we've definitely, it's raised it.
It's been present.
It's been present.
It's
Yeah.
definitely present.
There are other things that we've been missing as well. So there's only a couple of delegations that have treasuries that they brought. the financial ministers.
Good
Now,
point.
when we're talking about nature, and particularly from my point of view, the value of nature, if you haven't got anyone that can value it,
Yeah.
well, then you've got a bit of a problem. And those that have brought those financial institutions, financial ministers, they are sitting there and going, "You're talking to those greenies that, from the environment ministry. We don't, and one of them said to me, these environmental ministries, they're all sort of backward, aren't they? From their point of view, we need to get heads of state here, which we didn't succeed in doing. That needs to connect. We need to have COP to COP. We need to have the COPs connecting.
I want to get to that.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, but we need to have the financial ministries here as well.
Yeah.
And at the moment, this is the first finance day in the biodiversity COP. Next time, I'd like to see a trebling, if not more, of the
Very
finance
much so.
ministries.
And I agree. You do, and I forget which COP it was, but we invited and had a separate forum at the beginning of the climate COP where the finance ministers came for a few days with their leaders, and they actually had briefings and discussions around.
We've got to be careful about that because the last biodiversity COP I was at, they did the business and biodiversity thing in one place, then they had a weekend in between, so they all left.
Oh,
And then they had,
no.
so if you say doing it beforehand, the really key thing is to have those ministries in there. It's about bringing people together.
In the
Embed them.
discussion.
Yeah, you have to get them in the room.
In the discussion.
But let's talk food, because I was struck by your comments the other day in the discussion that we were having as a WBCSD-led conversation about why the COP process, in one sense, not misses this conversation, but doesn't seem to have a handle on how to deal with it, except as to the Rio Pavilions conversation. And I just wondered if you had any further thoughts about what it was that was necessary for food systems to come into both into climate and to nature as well, or does it need, as it has under the UN process at the moment, it has its own dialogue, as it were, but what does it need to actually get particularly the consumer to understand what their role is going to be in terms of food system change or transformation for that matter?
Yeah, so I think we're much further down the track on this in the climate space,
Right.
where people understand a bit sometimes the carbon miles of their food,
Yep,
some of the decision making of carbon intensity
Yep.
of food, plant-based diets. We still don't have sufficient connection between health, nutrition, climate, decarbonizing the food systems. But as you pointed out, we're even further away from that within the biodiversity COP. The concept of land use and land use conversion and deforestation is of course front and center.
Very much so.
Linking that to the role of food systems in it is clear. I mean, land use, food and agriculture and forests is recognized as one of the 3 highest impact sectors. So there's a lot of that discussion, but the systems changes associated with it aren't quite as mature here, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, we've run 2 sessions, I think, on food fatigue. One, we rolled things out, but there have been some sessions, but it isn't.
There's a whole food day actually yesterday.
There was, so there has been something going on, but it hasn't. But food is one of those places, there's a few of them, where all of this nexus comes together. It's actually where, I mean, you can't. It's all about the people. It's all about nutrition. It's all about health. It's all about the environment. It's all about the soil. It's all about climate. When everything comes together in that, which is why it's a perfect test bed for all of these things we're doing. It connects it up.
Yeah.
So speaking of connection, a follow-up roundtable this morning on this thing called COP to COP. Who wants to explain what COP to COP is?
COP to COP is trying to look. So it was a paper about 15 years ago, I think now. Looking at why have we got separate COPs?
Yep.
Okay, so can we?
And to be clear, there are actually 3.
Yeah, there's desertification is the 3rd.
Yeah. My favorite one, personally.
Is it?
Yeah, because I love dessert. Yeah. Okay.
So not the same.
It's such a bad joke, but we'll move on. So there are 3. Yes.
There are 3.
Desertification, biodiversity, and climate.
But I think that what we've been doing with the Nature Pavilion, which we're sitting in today, Nature Positive Pavilion, at Sharm, what we did was we did lots of events in the Nature Positive Pavilion, trying to make sure that this story, the narrative, was all interconnected. And we know that almost up to 40% of the climate solution is going to be nature-based.
Yep.
So I mean, then the science is very clear on that. So I think people are starting to realize, we've even seen some of the funders in the philanthropic space, which were all saying, no, let me get on with climate and I'll come to you later. Go away, go away.
Right.
Now they're saying, oh, actually, no, we need you in the room. So there is a big conversation there. What we're trying to do with that COP to COP is to look at how we can make sure that these things are more interconnected. So we don't have separate conversations. A good example of this would be if you are following the carbon credits and all of the things going on in the carbon space, what you need to do is get an intact forest, cut it all down, okay, and then plant new trees, and that's where you're going to get your money from. Okay, that's if you follow the climate.
That's
approach.
a climate solution.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and there's lots of organizations which are trying to encourage that, which is rather ridiculous, as we know, because there is nothing at the moment to support the intact forest.
Yep.
So you don't get any funding for having an intact forest.
No.
Because the mechanisms haven't been set up. So there's no point in actually solving all of the climate problems. What's the other stuff? The 30% of the mines that we're going to need to do the technological advances to get all those minerals to make all the wind turbines and all of that. That 30% of those are in high value ecosystems. So we're going to cut them down to make sure we achieve the climate solution.
Well, it's literally cutting your nose in spite of your face.
Yeah. So we need to interconnect these, and that's what COP.
If I could just add, that is exactly right. There's one additional UN convention that's underway right now that is going to be very important, and that is the UN Plastics Treaty.
Yeah.
And so we're starting to have the discussions around, they're all, again, on these different maturity curves.
Yes.
But how do we align the action agenda, the accountability agenda between these things?
Yeah, there's two bits coming up as well next year. The UN is setting up a futures commission as well,
which
is going to be really interesting, because what that's trying to do, based on the Welsh government future generation.
Oh, really? Okay.
Which I was involved.
Good model.
I was involved in a little bit of the development of that actually years back. But and I was actually on a webinar this morning with the President Commissioner. But trying to connect up what the future is. Well, you have to connect all these stories together.
Yeah, you do.
The other one is it's 80 years of Bretton Woods in 2024. So we've been talking to the Bretton Woods Institute.
Me and Motley will be very happy about that.
Well, that was coming out of the war and trying to set up what is the economic paradigm.
Yeah.
Now what we're doing, if they came up with the gold standard, maybe we need to come up with the rainbow standard here, or something that we're going to work with, because actually
put a copyright around that.
I should do that now. Actually, don't use that, please. I did that on a webinar once, and someone took the copyright while I was talking. So the idea of this, we've started with several organizations, and we do need to talk about this actually, because I haven't talked to you about it yet, but we've started
Good debrief opportunity, go for it.
we've started to look at what we could do for 2024 about what the new economic paradigm needs to be,
Mhm.
which needs to include all of these things we've been working on.
Mm.
Can we bring that together in some way? And I think that integration, we're going to be releasing the Integrated Capitals Protocol first look in January. So
Yeah.
that unites the natural, the social,
Yes.
the natural, the social, the human. This is probably 4 or 5 years ahead of where most people are thinking. But what we're doing is we're trying to grapple with all those trade-offs.
10.
No, it can't be 10. Don't
I
say
know it's not, but it's probably more like
Okay, but we've got to start looking at the interplay between
Agreed.
climate, nature, and people.
Yes.
We've got to start doing that. We've been working on that in the food system and various other places. We've got down some of the basics of that now. We've got the big conversations we've got to have, and we'll have that protocol, the first bit, to go out to people, and hopefully a lot of Australian organizations are going to help us to make that better.
we're there.
Good.
We've got your back. Last question. The question is, and you've already heard it, but I'll answer it. I'll ask it in front of everybody else, which is Minister Plibersek, our Environment Minister, is walking down the hall, sees you and stops you and says, what's the 1, 2, 3 things I need to know before I go into the negotiating room? Mark first, then
Okay. I've got
Diane.
3 very clear ones then. So we need to have high ambition. So we need to have nature positive, halting and reversing nature loss. That has to be in there.
Yep.
Okay, because we need to have an ambition that we can follow.
Yep.
Sorry if I'm stealing something else. The second one is target 15 for me on the business.
Mhm.
Okay, we've got it almost close there. We were just in the hall just a minute ago. Mandatory is still in brackets.
yes.
But no, it's still in brackets.
No, but it's still in.
It's still in.
My point is it's still in.
It's still in, but we need the brackets taken off.
I
and that's
know
really
that. Well, you just give them more tequila, don't you?
That's the trick.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we've got to get the assessment and disclosure of impacts and dependencies. That's got to be in there.
Yeah.
Because that's what's going to drive innovation. That's what's going to drive business. The last one is the subsidy reform, target 18. We've got to get the money to flow. $1.8 trillion going in the wrong direction. We're king canoe on the beach trying to stop the waves coming in. It's not working. No matter what we do, we could do everything brilliantly. If the money flows the other way, we're all going to be standing here getting wet.
Yeah.
So we do need to change that as well. They're the 3 that I would say.
Okay. Tanya, thank you.
Tanya, did you call me?
No, I'm thinking Tanya. I will
Oh,
add it to my list of things I'm telling Tanya when she arrives. Diane.
Check, check, check.
Yes.
But I think there's a really important role for governments like Australia to help those who are lagging
Yeah.
in making this progress.
Yep.
We've seen some success in helping move some of the negotiators along the journey,
Mhm.
even in this short amount of time. We are getting down to the wire.
Yeah, we are.
And now is the time.
Yeah.
So please lean in, push on those who need to understand why these are so important. Get it flipped, keep it in, and let's go.
Excellent. So thank you very much to Diane Holdorf and to Mark Gough for their contribution. Tomorrow, very exciting. Yes, Tony Golder couldn't do it today, but he's doing it tomorrow. And we're also got another Australian who is here, but doesn't work in Australia, which is Matthew Reedy from the Jeff. He's going to share with us. And of course, Rain Vanderberg from Forico will be joining with her final thoughts before she shuffles off back to Australia. So thank you very much for joining. Bye for now.